Welcome to today's live stream on the Asanee 44 channel. If you felt unseen forces in your dream or blocking your path and you don't know what the cause is, the Iyami may be trying to get your attention. Today we're diving into who they are, how they send signs, and what it means if you've unknowingly disrespected their power. If you're seeking deep Ifa teachings and authentic tools for transformation, you're in the right place. If you're watching live, feel free to drop your questions or reflections in the chat. And if you're catching the replay, type replay in the comments and let me know what stood out to you. We're going live in just a few seconds, so stay close and we'll get started. Greetings, and welcome all. Thank you all who are already joining us. So I appreciate you guys, and we are about to just go ahead and dig into the subject for today. So I do want to bring a quick disclaimer because there will be a small discussion about the symbolic references to certain sexual concepts. It's not going to get like deep and really sexual, but it is symbolic. So if you have children in the room, you may want to take them out if you don't want them hearing such discussion. It's not like lewd or anything like that, though, guys. Greetings, and welcome, Love C, and everybody else who is joining me and greeting me on IG and any other platform that you may be joining from. I think we're just on 3 platforms today. So let's go ahead and dig into this topic. First, I want to share the results from the survey that I put out on YouTube. Again, as always, thank you guys for go ahead and answering those questions. I wanted to get some feedback on how many people understood Iyami, what they are, what they've heard about them, so forth and so on. So about 78% of you guys who participated said that you knew that Iyami are the divine mothers who uphold justice. About 7% view them as witches, right, evil forces. 4% believe that they shouldn't be discussed at all. And then about 11% have never heard of them, which is typical, especially in the diaspora. Not typical at all in Nigeria, because this is a very commonly known topic, not necessarily discussed as much as some of the other Orisha. And we're going to get to why that is shortly. So let's just dig in so that people can gain a better understanding of these forces and, what they're about, what they do, how they can help us, how they can cause us some challenges, so forth and so on in our day-to-day lives. So in Yoruba society, Iyami is basically translated as mother or my mother, something like this. So they're often referred to as Iyami Asoranga or Iyami Aji. No, I'm not saying it exactly properly, but that's kind of a loosely based pronunciation of it. And they are basically representative of these forces. And I'm going to get to that shortly. Greetings, guys who are coming in. Asaju, thank you as always for coming in. Our This is here. Thank you likewise as always for showing up. And so now we're going to look at what all this means. So when we're talking about Iyami, IG rather, IG is that mystical force. So sometimes Iyami is referred to as Iyami IG, as I mentioned before. That's where we get that terminology witch from. This is why a lot of people think of Iyami as witches, because they've been told to do so. Because Iyami IG rather does translate into the word witch. However, it is more so of a mystical force or power that's associated with these forces, their creative abilities, their ability to transform, that divine feminine energy that they present and put out. It is not witch in the way we think about it in the Western world. When we're talking about Nigerian society and culture, a person who is a witch can actually, they just basically have this really divine mystical power and functionality to where they can transform things, right? And do things that the average person cannot do. These are physical or terrestrial forces who operate in this capacity. However, a witch's power is not about good or evil necessarily. They can impact both good and evil, just depending on the way you look at it. When it comes to Iyami, it's not necessarily the concept of evil, but instead punitive measures. So some people may look at it as evil because it can definitely cause them some hardships. And this is why you don't want to offend a Iyami. And we're going to really dig into that as we go along with the conversation. So, as I was saying before, this is more so about that protective, those disciplinary measures versus them being like involved in harmful sorcery and things like that we think about in the West. And anytime you hear that word witch, that's what people come to think about it as. The Orishas, those are the divine forces, the emissaries that operate back and forth between the heavenly realms, the astral realms, or whatnot. Iyami are actually physical forces, terrestrial forces that reside here on Earth. Okay, their functionality is more so of the primordial mothers, whereby they've been around before creation, before anything was here. So they had a hand in the creative process, and definitely their force is still felt throughout the world as we, live, sit, and breathe here. I have a comment on IG. Are they the ones that are called the witches of the night? Absolutely. I'm going to talk quickly about that and why that is shortly. So definitely, Iyami are referred to as the witches of the night because of how they operate. So, as I said before, they're physical forces, but they absolutely have high levels of spiritual power. Nobody can see Iyami though. All right. So you can't just go out and view Iyami, go and sit and talk with Iyami like you see me or whoever may be next to you at the moment. You don't see these forces, even though they do reside in the earth. All right. They don't dwell in the heavenlies like a lot of the other spiritual forces. Matter of fact, all of the other spiritual forces that we usually talk about in the tradition are astral-based forces, but Iyami are not. They're very, very special forces. Their job is to uphold balance and justice here on Earth. Their domain is the material realm, so they're going to govern a lot of things that are related to material functionality, basically how we operate, how we behave in day-to-day life. They are around to, reward righteousness. That's that aspect of them that you definitely want in your life because they can bless you tremendously, just like your physical mother can bless you tremendously. But they also punish you. And Iyami punishment is very harsh, more so harsh than pretty much any other Orisha, I would say, because of the way it's carried out. And I'm going to get to that as well. In Yoruba land, these forces tend to be more highly regarded. There's so Eshu. It's not that Eshu isn't highly regarded because he absolutely is. However, you'll see more people having a greater deal of respect and high regard and talking about Iyami more so. Matter of fact, when you do readings based on the Nigerian tradition, Iyami are 9 times out of 10 going to come up. They should come up all the time. I'm not going to say they do just because I don't know how everybody does their readings, but they should be coming up. Just like we hear all the time in the Western world, Eshu always gets a portion of the offering, which he does, but Iyami does too. For some reason, Iyami, well, I'm not going to say for some reason, I know that has a lot to do with Western patriarchy or what have you, and then the transition of the tradition here in the Western world or whatnot. There are a lot of aspects that have been left out, especially like Egbe and Iyami. These concepts you don't hear about a lot in the Western world as you do in Nigeria itself. So, but in Nigeria, you're going to feed Iyami the same way you're going to feed Eshu. Even more so in many instances, as I said before, depending on who is doing the divination and how much they really know about the tradition, and also if they're like operating according to tradition. That's a huge part of it too. So Eshu is vital. Eshu rewards and punisher, but he's more like that trickster energy, right? His lessons are really swift. They can be lean. Just, here you go. This is a lesson for you. You did this. You're going to receive the reward or the punishment pretty soon thereafter, right? So his reactions are really, really quick and swift. All right. Usually direct. So for instance, with issue, let's say you are gossiping about somebody, right? And then maybe a couple of days, even a few weeks later, you hear about somebody was gossiping about you and you didn't like that. You didn't like the way you felt about it. And then all of a sudden it triggers that memory that, oh, I was gossiping about this person not too long ago. So that would be more so like an issue type of lesson, right? You got that back real quickly. It was kind of lean. It was like kind of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth type of situation. Lesson learned. You move forward. You hopefully stop gossiping about people and things like that, right? But when we talk about Iyami, these lessons tend to be much more unyielding, brutal, and it can be really indirect, right? Especially when we're talking about things related to somebody having power or justice, moral responsibility, and they are yielding it in the wrong way. So Iyami's punishment is going to come, but it may not be direct, like I said before, like, oh, you were gossiping, somebody gossiped about you. You may be involved in a situation. Let's say if somebody is, I'm not going to say you because I don't want to put this on anybody, but let's say an individual is abusing children. For instance, they're abusing their child, or it could be some other children. Maybe they work at a daycare or something like that. And so they're continuously involved in this type of behavior. Iyami doesn't like that because Iyami is very protective over children and women in particular. So that person may just start to see so many different negative disruptions in their life. And it may have nothing to do with their children or even children around them. Their finances may just start going awry. They might start having problems in their love life, in their relationship. And they can't really directly pinpoint it to what they're doing because it's not related. And then it's like really brutal. Like so many things in their life are just really, really messed up, and they can't kind of put the pieces together and they don't understand what's going on. So that's kind of that deep level, Iyami punishment. Iyami is the mothers, right? So this is how women can be as well. Women tend to remember things for a long time. So something that you did about 10 years ago, they might bring it back to you and say, oh, you remember when you did this, and you've long forgotten about it. But a woman will remember those types of things. And that's kind of the same concept that we think about when it comes to Iyami's punishment. I got to come in here. Do Iyami come through people? I know you said we can't see Iyami. So how does the Iyami translate into the physical realm? So not to my knowledge. I don't know if you're still here. Our answer the question is, do Iyami come through people? I've never heard that before. Iyami are physical forces, but you can't see them with the naked eye. So they are around. They are said to like dwell out in the trenches where most people don't reside and things like that. But nobody knows because nobody has seen them. So I can't answer that question. I don't think that they operate through people in that way, but they possibly could. I'm just not aware of it. So now let's look at some of their symbology because this is important as well when it comes to dealing with Iyami. I think you're saying Alafia, Amoy, Waid. I think I'm saying it right. I would just, if you heard me, if you could provide a response to that, if possible. So going back to their symbology, one of their symbols is the bird, like you saw in the thumbnail, like the birds that are surrounding them. It could be different types of birds. Owls are closely linked to them, but it could be multiple types of birds, okay? Because birds represent that notion of that intermediary force between the physical realm and the heavenly realms, because birds fly, right? They go to the heights of heaven. Iyami are really, really closely to these dynamics. And also birds represent that notion of, observation. They can see things, the bird's eye view, so to speak. They can see things that we can't see because they have that panoramic view, sort of like a drone, right? They have that overhead type of trajectory, and they can see in ways that we can't see. And that's Iyami. They can see beyond what we can see. High level of wisdom, okay? And that's how Iyami operate. They fly at night. Iyami are said to fly at night, to be up at night. A lot of the imagery and the discussions around like Halloween and stuff like that, we see the witches riding on a broom and things like that. Those concepts actually came from this notion of Iyami. However, of course, they've been sensationalized and turned into something else. A lot of the things that we deal with in our society actually come from the our traditions or what have you. Many of the things, a lot of the movies that we watch come from our traditions, and we don't know it because they've been repackaged and told to us that there's something else. Color wise, red, black, and white are frequently linked to the notion of Iyami. Okay. And matter of fact, this is, I got on Ilekis. Hope you guys can see this in here. These are my Iyami Ilekis. I also have on SU too, because they are represented in black and red as well. So you're going to see these colors closely connected to them. So I have a question here. Maybe the way they translate their energy in a way that will come into our awareness would be through an Ifa reading. Absolutely. So if you get a reading, it will show up if Iyami is dealing with you in a certain way. When you get an Ifa divination, it's always going to come back that you need to, appease Iyami, and we'll get to that later on too. Just has anyone ever seen them in any type of form? Not to my knowledge. They have not been, no one has visibly seen these forces, to my knowledge. So it's hard to tell. Now, I'll get into that too. There are people who are really closely connected to Iyami in a certain way. They understand the mysteries of Iyami, so they may have seen them physically, but in general, nobody's just going to see Iyami like that. Red, their color is going to symbolize their life force energy, their dynamic power, and also the association to menstrual blood in particular, because Iyami are tied to the female, the cycles that we go through, right? In our menstruation and birthing process and so forth and so on. And I'm going to get to those dynamics as well. Black embodies the concept of mystery, protection, and also the womb, because the womb is a space that is darkened and nobody can see inside of it. You don't know exactly what's churning in there, even when you got these sonograms and things like that, where they can visualize certain aspects of it. Nobody can say exactly what's going on in there, especially when a woman is, pregnant and she's going through her gestation phase. White represents purity, enlightenment, and also the cleansing process, the cleansing of the womb, the menstrual cycle. When a woman bleeds, that is a cleansing ritual, as I say all the time. It is all about releasing the physical toxins and also spiritual toxins that a woman has in her body from herself, and also if she's sexually active, from the male that she's dealing with. If she just gave birth to a child, she's releasing toxins from the child that was in her womb, etc. So you got another question. How do you know if you're connected to Iyami? I'm going to get to that. Thank you for that question, but I'm going to get to that shortly. Iyami and Eshu's connection. These two forces are highly connected, as I just said. This is why I have on both of the Ilekis for them, because their relationship is very much so symbiotic. Another question, do priests of Oshun have a strong connection to Iyamis? I don't know. I don't know about that. I think it really depends on the priest. You're very welcome to. I think it depends on the priest. Not necessarily just because you're a priestess of Oshun that you're going to be connected to Iyami automatically, right? Because Oshun is a water deity for one, and actually, like Yemoya, if I would think more so if somebody was connected to Yemoya, they would have a stronger connection with Iyami because Yemoya also deals with those menstrual cycles as well because of her connection to the moon energy. Alafia. I was trying to get to the message. Another question: spiritual investigation or divination be done if waking up calling out for them in the middle of the night? If you're calling out, yeah, so definitely, I would say get a reading if you're not sure what's going on. If that's your question, I didn't fully understand it, but I think you're asking if you're calling out to Yummy in the middle of the night, should you do a spiritual investigation or divination? The answer to that is yes. If you're asking which one to do, I would say a full-on divination session if that's the question. He's saying should, yeah. So I would say full on divination because if you're waking up calling out to Iyami, there's something deep going on at that point, and you need a really thorough assessment, knowledge of what's because if you're waking up calling out to them, they're most likely calling you. You need to do some type of sacrifices, most likely. And I'm going to say probably all of your sacrifices there. You're welcome. Not just to Yummy. Yummy would definitely need to be appeased, but there may be other Orishas that need appeasing as well. Is Yummy and Ile the same? Forgive me if you already answered it. I don't know what you mean by Ilie. So I'm not familiar with that. Somebody is saying, oh, I would just yes, you're saying that they are the same. So I guess you're answering the question that Iyami and Ilige are the same. I didn't answer it. Thank you. Thank you guys. Sorry, I'm trying to get to all of the messages. You're saying you're welcome. So let's get back to it. So going back to was I here? Yes. Yummy and issues connection, right? So when it comes to Yummy and issue, their functionality is complementary in your Yoruba cosmology. Okay, is a very closely connected relationship. Issue is the door opener, right? So it will be symbolic of a male actually opening up the portal, the womb during the act of sex. So Eshu opens up portals, right? And he plants seeds. So that will be the seeds of ideas within us because Eshu governs communication as well. Iyami, she receives. That's the process of conception. Both are necessary, right? This is why men and women are so important. This is one of the reasons why I absolutely love the Ifa tradition because it speaks a lot on the importance of women. It does not negate them to negate us to secondary status. Instead, it shows the importance of us being connected and working in unison with one another because that conception aspect comes from, of course, that seed being needed to implant whatever it implants into the womb. So if we're talking about a physical child, obviously we're talking about sperm here. But if we're talking about in relation to the creative process as a whole, that will be in the form of ideas or what have you, right? And then, of course, Iyami is going to nurture those ideas. They nurture rather those seeds. So that's the gestation process of like when a woman would carry a child to full term, she's going to nurture them and carry them. And in that process, the creation is going on and they're developing and getting what they need. And so that's Iyami's role. But both forces are absolutely necessary in that process. So Eshu is going to operate in motion, that outward expression, symbolic of a phalanx, an erect penis, right? So that's that energy that is needed to get things moving, all right? And so Eshu is going to be very prominent in the decision-making process, in logistics and things of that nature, the same way men are really great at logistics. I'm not saying by any means that women are not logistical, because we are. We do have that aspect. But typically, a man is built to be more logistical than a woman because of his role in natural processes. When it comes to Iyami, they operate more so in mystery, in the darkness, right? Symbolic of the energy of the womb, as I mentioned before. So their energy is going to be felt at crossroads or transitions of those major aspects of life, whereas Eshu's energy is going to be at the crossroads of decision making when you have a major decision. But Iyami is those major transitions that we experience, those thresholds of creativity. So the birth cycle, the menstruation cycle, menopause, miscarriages, even death. All of those are major transitions in the life process itself. SU is going to deal with the details, the things that we do in order to initiate those birth cycles and so forth and so on. And obviously, Iyami here is going to be connected deeply with the female cycle. However, this affects men too. So it's not like it's just women that are impacted by Iyami's energy. You're asking, can one get initiated into the... So we're going to discuss that as well. We're going to discuss that. I'm going to get to that. Please explain Adabi in relation to Iyami. So I will, Adissa, if you could respond to that if you are here and you say in this relation. So I'm going to try to get him to respond to that aspect of it if he's available to answer you there. Okay, so going back to where I was, we are, unlike the Orishas, right? The regular Orisha that we deal with. Sorry, guys, let me take this question before it disappears on me. You're saying, what are the signs that Eshu is trying to get your attention? So Eshu, it kind of like in those little tricky things that you see when something is kind of just all, especially when we're talking about things related to communication dynamics, right? So if you're having a lot of tricky energy, I'll explain it too like this, especially from an astrological perspective. The planet Mercury, that's the same energy as Eshu, right? So when you're seeing the things that that energy does, especially when it goes into retrograde, this is why I talk about retrograde energy quite often. When Mercury is in retrograde, you're going to see a lot of that tricky energy, communication delays, people kind of misunderstanding each other, so forth and so on. There could be a lot more signs. I'm not saying this is only it, but when you're seeing a lot of little trippy things happen, especially with communication, technology, even so transportation, etc., that's issue definitely at play. Okay, so I would, advise you to check on that. It may not be issue. I'm not saying that anytime you have these issues, it is issue 100%, because it could be any Orisha. But those are some things to think about when we're talking about issue. You say, I'm not sure if you answered my question, but how does Iyami form in the physical? So they don't. You cannot see Iyami physically. You cannot. They are terrestrial forces, meaning that they live in the physical realm. However, nobody can just see them with their naked eye, at least to the commonly held knowledge here. So our Dissa is asking, what do you mean by Adabi? He doesn't understand the question. And you said, I was told that Ogun Adabi is worse than a curse, but I still don't completely understand this. Okay, so hopefully he'll be able to respond there. So unlike other Orisha who have their own pot or what have you, or their own vessel where they accept their offerings at, Iyami does not. Iyami accepts offerings at Eshu's shrine and at the crossroads. So Eshu basically, comes in and takes care of her offerings and things like that. The rest of it got cut off. But hearing that's that same symbology of the male protecting the female. So Eshu protects and provides for her, takes care of Iyami in that way. So that's why Iyami's offerings are put in Eshu's shrine. Okay, and then she receives them that way. Response to this, you saying, oh, I get it. Adabi, and I know I'm probably mispronouncing this word. It's like a curse. It doesn't relate to Iyami. All right. Thank you for that. Another question over here. What are offerings you can give the Iyamis, and how do you give offerings? We're going to get to that. We're going to get to Iyami appeasement. Definitely. That's a major part of everything we're talking about, because it's something that you should be doing on a regular basis. Everybody is like important. Very important. So now we're going to get into their power, protection, and their domain of authority. So Iyami, they basically coexist with other spiritual forces like the Igungun, Egbe, etc., etc. They are a collective group of forces. That's why you said the Iyami mothers with an S is plural. Okay. But they have their own domain of control. All right, just like other forces, they have their realms that they oversee. Same thing when it comes to the Iyami. They are often called upon when it comes to fertility and enforcing justice and providing powerful protection whenever they are properly honored. That being said, it's not like Iyami just oversee this one small thing. They are going to they're going to play a role in pretty much everything that we do in the physical realm, right? This is why they are so important. They are acting so much so in unison when it comes to other spiritual forces or what have you. So they work really, really closely with them. Okay, I answered that one already. Sorry about that, guys. So let's see. You're saying thanks, but is there anything worse than a curse that one can speak over you? Thanks. So the answer to that is, oh, I got it. Adobe is like a curse, not really like Iyami. Or did I say that already? I think those were new. Okay, so I think with the conversation that you're having, you know what? Probably just DM me if you're on IG, or you can also put it like in the comments or where have you, and we'll try to get to that topic, because that's a separate topic than what we're talking about with the Iyami. And I definitely want to honor everybody's time who is here so we can stay on track with this particular conversation. Let's see. The Iyami, they communicate symbolically, oftentimes through the dream world. So if somebody is dreaming about things, they're usually going to have a lot of dreams about like women, maybe birds, but elderly women especially. This is not always going to be your ancestors, right? Because a lot of times people think they just have a dream about an elderly woman or what have you. Maybe that was my grandmama and so forth and so on. It could be, but it can also be Iyami. So don't mistake that. If they're showing up in your dreams, they're trying to tell you something. They're definitely trying to get your attention, and you want to pay attention, okay? They're going to give you some intuitive warnings, sometimes just sudden revelations, things like that. A lot of times, a lot of these things are going to happen at nighttime, because that is their domain of operation, usually in the night spaces. Again, the unseen realms, the hidden realms, that's how they operate. Now, when it comes to dealing with the Iyami, anybody can talk about and acknowledge Iyami in a very respectful and a humble way. However, when it comes to ritual work, you don't want to integrate into this on your own. I don't care if you go online and you read some kind of thing that says this is what you give to Iyami. That's not the way you do it. Okay, you want to go to somebody who is trained in this process and knows exactly what they're doing. Because as I said before, Iyami takes their offerings in Eshu's shrine, or at the crossroads, still is connected with Eshu. And so you really want to know what you're doing. Really, that's the case with any Orisha, but I'm going to put a special emphasis on this here because you don't want to play around with Iyami at all. You just don't want to offend Iyami because you're going to have some really disparaging situations go on in your life if you do. Speaking openly about these forces or even revealing their mystery without really paying respect to them is not something that you want to do either. So it's not something that you just go around just talking about Iyami, so forth and so on. Instead, you always want to give due respect. You want to humble yourself whenever you're dealing with this subject matter of the Iyami, because you can have some really, really serious consequences, especially when speaking out of turn, because we go with this whole dialogue, especially with the witches and so forth and so on. A lot of people don't really know what they're talking about, and they just get into these conversations because of their Western interpretations and mindsets about spiritual dynamics as a whole. And so you don't want to do that. There's a whole lot of secrecy surrounding the topic of Iyami in and of itself, okay? And you do want to honor that as well. Usually in the Yoruba culture, people don't even just come out and, say Iyami, etc., without having that authority to do so, because again, it's very disrespectful. A lot of times, even the elders in the communities who know a lot about this and they work with those spiritual forces, they are usually going to say, our mothers or those who fly at night. Somebody asked that before on Instagram, especially when they're around like young children or people who don't really know about the tradition, because they don't want to make the mistake of offending Iyami, and also they don't want to make the mistake of saying something that might be repeated, especially like around young children who don't know what they're saying. So they're very, very careful about how they speak about these forces in public forums of that nature. All right. If you're working closely with the Iyami, you don't reveal their secrets. You don't talk about a lot about specific ritual work and things like that. You definitely just not going to speak lightly of them. You don't boast, especially when you're dealing with anything related to Iyami. You do not want to get in your ego whatsoever. Alrighty, so aside you're saying IG literally translates to the one who responds, the one who works, the one who answers. That connotation is a little different than the which the one who responds, answer, work. So I hear you, but I've been informed that in Yoruba culture, IG translates to which. That's what it means. That's what I was told. If it's different, I would have to look that up and get more information. You said, I believe, which diminishes who they are. When you're thinking about it from the aspect of Western culture, the Western world, absolutely, because the terminology which doesn't mean the same thing in the Western world as it does in Yoruba society or even in other African cultures. So you always have to take in the context of the culture in which you're dealing with when it comes to dynamics such as that. Another question, it came up that I had to do an PC every 3 months for a year. The Bible walked me through it. I love this topic, but you have to approach it with caution. You absolutely do. So yeah, you probably will. You want to do as much as you possibly can, and we're gonna get to that as well. Mothers of the night is what I hear mostly. Yeah, that's what I've heard mostly too. The mothers of the night or the women of the night and things like that. But it's kind of all wrapped up and embedded in that same concept. Let's see. So some people are born with that deep connection with the Iyami, right? So if they call you, right? It's nothing that somebody has to come to you and tell you, oh, you were called by Iyami. You will just know. You will get that download, that information from Iyami directly. So, but whenever somebody is marked by Iyami, it's kept in secrecy. It's really shrouded in secrecy. This is not something that they're going to go out and boast about and talk about. Most of the time, you won't know it. The average person is not going to know it because they're not really supposed to reveal that information to anybody. This is a strong, deep calling. When it comes to initiation, somebody asked about this earlier. If you're initiated into the mysteries of Iyami, this is definitely rare. very, very much so secretive because their power is really, really immense. If that person is initiated, nobody will know, right? So it is not really known whether Iyami comes and does the initiation themselves, or if they have somebody else to take the person through the initiation process. I.e., is it just a spiritual initiation between that person and Iyami? Or is the initiation physical in the same way that somebody would initiate unto Ifa or another Orisha or what have you? That's unknown, because even if it is done in the physical realm, anybody involved in that process could not speak about it. So you're not going to just walk around and know that this person is initiated unto Iyami, because it's not something that they tell you. You can absolutely do the appeasement work, which we'll talk about. As I said before, you can get Iyami Elekis. You can get those for you to have the protection of Iyami with you. But as far as a regular initiation rite, like any other Orisha, that is not something that you are going to see in the regular domain. Now, getting to some of the signs that Iyami is displeased with you, and they can come in multiple forms. They can definitely include persistent misfortunes in your life, as I gave an example earlier. A lot of times when people are dealing with Iyami, they just see bad luck back to back to back to back to back, and they can't explain it. Again, they can't easily link it to something that they did, because a lot of times it'll just be dealing with their whole entire life. So they can't easily say, oh, I did this to this person and this is why I'm experiencing XYZ. Okay. Mysterious illnesses usually can't be easily diagnosed. The doctors are like, what is going on with you? They do every type of diagnostic test that they could think of. They give you every type of remedy that they can think of, and nothing happens. Okay. Blocked progress, very, very strong sign of Iyami. Things are just not moving in your life properly. Disturbing dreams, as I talked about before, I already said that too, about birds. If you're dreaming a lot about birds or elderly women, definitely check that out. Somebody said earlier they're waking up and they're saying, Iyami, screaming out Iyami. Yeah, you definitely need to go ahead and get a reading to see what's going on, because that is likely Iyami trying to get your attention. Usually, any type of disruption they cause in your life are going to be ongoing, persistent, resistant to other forms of remedies, even spiritual work. Okay, so you want to definitely take care of Iyami as soon as you possibly can, whenever they tell you to do so. All right. If you ignore these signs, just going to get intensified. It's not going to just go away on their own. It's not just you're going through a rough patch. That happens sometimes. Some people just are going through a rough patch in life, clears up on its own. If there's an issue with the Iyami, that's not going to happen. It's going to continue. It's going to get worse. All right. You're not going to have that divine protection in the same way, because when the mothers get angry, just like, in real life, your mother get angry with you, you are going to suffer. You're going to feel it in a whole different way. Diminished blessings, as I talked about before. And it can also translate generationally. All right. So it doesn't necessarily just stop with that person. You can experience those generational patterns, or what people may call a generational curse or what have you, if you go for prolonged periods of time without appeasing Iyami, and it just goes from generation to generation to generation. All right. If you suspect that you have offended Iyami in any way, you want to go ahead and consult with your owl, your Iyanifa, whoever it is that you work with, so that you can go ahead and do the appeasement work. And that's what we're going to get into now. You guys have already asked about this part. How do you appease Iyami? All right. First and foremost, you always want to appease Iyami as much as possible to help you maintain that harmony in your life, to avoid those misfortunes that we talked about before. it can and should be done as often as you possibly can. If you want to do it once a month, you definitely can do that. Somebody said that they were told that they need to appease Iyami every 3 months for at least a year. Whatever it is for you, you need to try your best to do it. Two main types of appeasement that Iyami takes or deals with on a regular basis. Okay, so you're gonna do the about two Iyami, the Yoruba and the Appeasing. So these are two different types. So sometimes when people get readings and they're like, why am I feeding Iyami twice? Because one, they're just that important. But I'm going to break down what the two mean. So the Yoruba, that's the offering made to both Eshu and Iyami. Okay, so it is basically going to be placed in Eshu's shrine. He's going to take his portion. He gives a portion to Iyami. This is usually going to be done anytime you get an Ifa reading. It should come up anytime you get an Ifa reading. When it comes to the Appeasing, this is a specific offering to Iyami, just the way that Ogun or Oshun or any other Orisha would ask for an offering, Iyami would ask for their own offering, okay? It can be done after reading, but it can also be done at any time. You do not have to wait to go and get a reading in order to do this particular type of offering. It can come in multiple forms. Somebody asked before, like, what do you want to feed Iyami? At the end of the day, whatever they ask for, right? And just like other Orishas, they are going to ask for things that they typically accept as part of their offering. So if they ask for a chicken or a goat, I'm not sure exactly if these are the things that they take. I can't remember off the top of my head. I do have my list, but I can't remember specifically. But if they ask for a chicken or if they ask for a goat, you want to give them that. That's part of the Pesi offering, right? The Yoruba is always the same thing, pretty much. That's the echo and the other materials and things like that that they take along with Eshu. But the Appeasing can be different from person to person depending on what you're dealing with at that time. Again, very much akin to how other Orishas take their offerings, okay? Appeasing Iyami is also about walking in gentle character, Iwapele. You want to live a good life. The more you live in alignment with your destiny and in harmony with your destiny, the better it is all for you. So that way you don't have to worry about not, respecting Iyami when you're walking in alignment with your destiny. So I missed it earlier, but this is all I have for you guys here. If anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat window and I'll get to them. I didn't understand the statement that you just put in there. You say in test teams? I don't know what you're saying there. But guys, if you have any more questions or comments, concerns, or what have you, please feel free to let me know before we close out. Next week, I plan to talk about the roles and responsibilities of a Babalawo. Because I get this quite often. People are saying, what should I expect from somebody who is serving me spiritually? So we'll talk about those types of things and also like how to be able to find someone, how to be able to find a good owl or what have you. You're saying gizzards are intestines as far as what they take. Not sure about that. Like I said, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I have my list and everything, but it's not something that I keep at the forefront of my mind. So I don't want to say that that's something that they're taking. It may be something that you recently gave them or what have you. You're saying this was a great topic, Losi. Thank you so much. You're asking, are pregnant women advised to make offerings to Iyami? So anybody is advised to make offerings to Iyami. That would be a great idea. But if you're saying to sustain the baby for fertility purposes, it may be Iyami, but it could be a different Orisha depending on what's going on with that woman. That's a great question, by the way. But it just really depends on the situation, confused on what offerings to give Iyami and when. So you are going to give offerings to Iyami whenever they ask for it after you get an Ifa reading. Or if you just want to go and appease them on your own, you can contact your owl and say you want to do Epesi. I know I'm messing the word up. Epesi to Iyami, and they will figure out then what you actually need to give to Iyami, because it's not going to be the same for everybody. I can't just say go and give Iyami a chicken, for instance, because they may not be what they want from you at that particular time. So you're saying, hi, Fatima here. I grew up Catholic, but I'm curious about the Yoruba religion. Absolutely. So definitely keep following us. We're talking about this all the time. Thank you for joining us as well. For appeasement to Iyami, you're saying intestines for him. Right. So yeah, going back to that, I'm not going to misspeak on what offerings that they take, because I'm definitely not trying to disrespect Iyami in any way. So it just depends on what comes up when it comes to giving them certain types of appeasement. You're saying, with all due respect, my question is, why is there sacrifices of animals in the religion? Animals are life force offerings. You give the life force, that blood, in order to quicken or hasten results. Sacrifice is a part of every aspect of life. You're going to sacrifice something no matter what, right? So when it comes to sacrifices, either you're going to sacrifice a life force offering, or you're going to sacrifice something in your life. So it could go either way. But just the short of it, that's why, sacrifices are done, is to appease different spiritual forces, so that not necessarily you're going to circumvent things, but you can make things a lot easier in your life by giving the animal. And it's the same. You said you grew up Catholic. It's the same concept in the Old Testament. Matter of fact, the Old Testament, all of it came from the traditions of Africa. The concept there, to make atonement, right? In the Bible, in the Old Testament, it was outlined to make atonement for sins and so forth and so on. It's the same concept, not necessarily sin in the same way you might think about it in the Western world, from a biblical perspective, but just missing the mark, not being where you need to be, not being in alignment, things like that. Okay. You said you've given that to Iyami, but it's one of them. Yeah. Iyami, they can take different things. Can Iyami also have connection with men? Absolutely. So they have connections with anybody, right? But when it comes to their overall being, what they're about, that's definitely the feminine aspects of who we are. Men have feminine aspects as well. We all have masculine and feminine aspects of us. Obviously, only biological women bleed and gestate and carry children. So that's a whole nother scenario when it comes to women from that perspective. You said the Bible has the same sacrifices, actually representative of the cycle of natural life. Absolutely. That's what I was just saying. Like even Islam, right? So every single solitary religion or spiritual practice has dealt with sacrifices at some level. But the Bible, they just said, no, it's not, enforced in the way that it used to be enforced. So will Iyami show up in someone's Isefa, and only if they had Isefa from a distance and yet to do Itefa? When you say show up, are you saying would you have to feed Iyami? Is that what you mean as part of your Isefa? Thanks. Oh, you're very, very welcome. So our Adisa is saying they can request for animal intestines or other parts of animal eggs, even echo, tutu, which is the local palp. So yeah, he's saying that is part of their offerings. Like I said, I don't want to say because I don't have that information in front of me, so I'm not about to, you said in there, I'm not about to say what is and is not there, because I'm not trying to disrespect Iyami by any means. Why would one have a pact with Iyami? I'm not sure what you mean by that. If you can explain further, what do you mean by having a pact with Iyami? Is it bad to get your Eleki beads from another priest? So are you saying you're working with one owl and then you want to get your Elekis from another owl? Not necessarily bad, but I would question, why would you want to do that? Because if you're working with somebody, why not get your elections from the person that you're working with? When it comes to working with somebody, I'm going to really dig into that next week. When you're working with an owl, you want to work with that owl for the most part. There are situations where some people have like two owls or what have you for whatever reason, but even if that's the case, you should be working with those people, right? If you want to leave or you're considering leaving, then that's another scenario altogether. But if you are legit working with somebody else and you're satisfied with the work that they're doing, why would you want to go to get elections from a different person? I'm not understanding that part. Yeah, you're saying yes. So it's okay. It's not like wrong or bad to do that, but I don't think that's probably ideal. If you're working with somebody, it's just like a doctor, right? If you have a doctor, you're working with them, they know your history, they know about you, they know who you are. They're going to be the best reference person for you to stick with, unless something is wrong with their relationship and you're just like, this is not working for me anymore. That's a different scenario. But otherwise, if they're working out for you, it's probably better for you to stay with them because they have knowledge of who you are and your history. And all of this kind of jumping around from hour to hour and working with, 5, 6 different people at one time. First of all, it's not part of tradition. Even so, it's not a good idea. Understand, when you're working with somebody, I'm going to really get into this next week. When you're working with somebody, you are connecting yourself to that person's energy, for better or for worse. So if they got good energy and they're doing good things, you are benefiting from the blessings of their energy when they do spiritual work for you, even when they're not actively involved in your spiritual work. If they're your owl, then you're taking advantage of whatever work they're doing, even for themselves. If they're doing protection work for themselves, if they're doing prosperity work for themselves, health, etc., you actually benefit from that. On the opposite end of that is true as well. If this person is dealing with some negativities, if they're involved in corruption, if they're doing scam work and so forth and so on, you are going to be impacted by that negative energy as well. That's why it's very, very important for you to choose the right person and take your time with that process. You said it's working, and thank you. I hope I answered your question. I know I went on because that's a deep, deep level topic that I want to get into, because I get asked a lot about the Babalawo situation. You're saying it's best to stay with one owl or Babalawo. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you're confirming or asking, but definitely it is more once you find the right person. I'm not saying just go and get with somebody and just stick with them no matter what, right? They should be actually doing proper work for you. They should be able to help you out. And as I said before, you don't want to deal with somebody who's dealing with a lot of scams and corruptions and things like that, because that's going to impact you as well, even if they're not doing corrupt work for you, right? If they are doing corrupt work as a whole, even for other people, that energy is going to come back on you as well. This is why it's so important to choose the right people that you want to work with. And you're saying the work I receive from my elect is outstanding. However, there's no teaching or anything to further my knowledge. It's mostly male dominated and not any ear or resources to learn the culture. I'm really going to dig into that, because that is a very, very common challenge in the diaspora as a whole on so many different levels, with not having that deep level educational component, just people who are able to do the work. And like you said, they do the work well because they're really skilled in what they do. But for somebody who wants to go deeper and really learn the tradition, that's not always ideal. So that's something that I do want to really dig into and help you guys to navigate that aspect of it a little bit better. Any more questions for me? Because I'm getting into next week's episode. So, Alafia, greetings to everyone who is showing up. We're actually about to close up. Thank you all for joining us. This was a very, very beautiful discussion. I wish you all the best. Ashe. Have a very blessed and beautiful day and beyond, guys.